Hi, welcome back to Marx Headroom. That's Marx, M-A-R-X, Marx Headroom. And I started this channel when people began calling me, what was it, Max Headroom. I got a few comments like that. It got me thinking, and then I looked into the guy from the 80s and thought, well, I can see some resemblance here. Have some acting experience, and there's something of a tech vibe that he was giving off. And of course, I'm an engineer as well. So let's examine that. And then I decided to blend the 5-day fast that I've been doing for 5 years into this delivery. And at the end of the 5-day period, um, try to talk to the camera for 20 minutes to, in some cases, over an hour. So I'm actually not trying to talk to the camera, I'm trying to talk to my tribe. So if you're returning, I appreciate it. It's great to reconnect. If you're new, um, there's a series of these, maybe 20 of them that are out there on YouTube, and I think I've got some out there on TikTok, and I've got to actually have a whole collection of these on Substack, and it's not widely distributed. Um, Last year I published 26 books, and I don't really promote all that. And it's not like I wrote them all last year. There've been things that I've been compiling for a long time. And I've probably put out 500 to 700 videos last year across between personal transformation and social commentary, and then some on fasting and lifestyle and that kind of thing, and exercise. And then a large number on on business from my experience around the world in oil and gas. And but on this channel, I usually, try to dedicate some time to personal development and what, being nonconformist for a period of time to the traditional dietary and kind of the going outside of the norm of what most people think is survivable, to tell you what I see, and from this nonconformist, and I guess some people might call it abstaining from some of the pleasures of modern American lifestyle, and what you're able to see from a more neutral point of view. Interesting. This last week, actually, the last 2 weeks, I've had a similar question come to me about how to do some of this deep work, how to examine yourself to develop your authenticity and to see into your true values and to experience who you really are. And first of all, I think that's very difficult to do because, and you look around, you see a lot of people using substances to try to clear away the conditioning that they were raised with, or they're encountering, or the things that seem to be barriers to what their sense of self might be like in their own fantasy. Because if you've only felt that true sense of self, you at some point you may have been tricked into thinking it actually would feel like being a king, or putting on some kind of new identity that is somehow where the pasture's greener, always on the other side of the fence. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think getting into this almost a state of realizing that you kind of the abyss, or we call it the abyss, but where you actually kind of lose contact with that old sense of security and have this sense of nothingness and the experience of more unbiased and unprejudiced and life outside of the class system, so to speak, is kind of a sense of surrender and free fall. And that can be pretty scary. So I spent a lot, a lot of time in that place. And I've also spent time in that place while I was also sitting in various positions in life in the past. And most recently, someone asked me about how to do some dream analysis. So let me walk through something that actually occurred in my process recently, and kind of walk through what happened. If you may be bored, you may be interested, but nonetheless, I'm going to put this out there, and it's not done this before, so I hope you'll bear with me. These are some tender topics that I'm going to dive into. But basically, there's a dream that I had where I'm sitting in my corner office, and this does seem rather real to me because I was running a large, sophisticated organization. And I had kind of risen over the course of maybe 6 months from being, actually where I was homeless. I was living out of my car to being senior executive vice president, or you might even call it a president, or having all the authority of someone that was really a CEO, and over a relatively large group of people. And I made that rise rather quickly. I recovered from a really terrible time in my life, but I'd achieved this position that I was not really all in about it in my heart, but I was doing it to sustain myself and my family. I had 3 kids and their mother that were counting on me to perform in life, and I also had some abilities that I felt like was my calling and my responsibility to utilize. So I did, and as I used those, they ended up putting me in the corner office, and I ended up, actually having a large group of people around me that I really enjoyed, working with, and although I think many of them saw them as working for the man, so to speak, or for this institution or group or financial services organization that it was that I was leading, um, I saw my role as keeping the system running, and making sure that all the people that were so integral to delivering the services that this organization was delivering, that it all worked in concert. And I felt like it was almost like being well, now that I have experience in film and directing and producing stories, it felt like I was actually a producer, and that I was really, um, delivering a talent and solutions for clients. And there were stories involved because we were basically doing a lot of transactions and M&A, they might call it, or mergers and acquisitions or divestitures, and helping buyers and sellers understand a highly technical um, asset that was being, bought and sold. And so sophisticated people would come into our office to try to understand and put a value to these oil and gas fields, actually, that were being offered for sale. So I had a staff that I really had a strong connection to. And having just prior to this been around the world and really kind of gotten out of my technical, um, shoes, so to speak, and more into the people that were around the world delivering technology and some solutions management and advisory services to those people. Um, I was really all about the relationship to those, and I understood the financial services that were being, provided, quite well. I had mentors in the business that had prepared me for this role. So I had the corner office, and some people might look at the story I've told, to this point, like I don't really appreciate what I had, but I do. It's just I had another calling, and my if you've read my book or noticed one of the books that I wrote was called The Gap, and it's about sustaining it and finding who you really are while staying in some of the systems that may or may not be serving you or your real needs. So in this dream, I'm in this corner office, and it happens to be very much like the real office that I had a few years ago. And there was a situation that had evolved there rapidly for me where I rose to running this group because of my technical abilities and also my insights into to people. And so there was some leadership skills that I think were being utilized there, and they totally transcended and pushed me past all the old school things that most people had to wait in an organization to go through a series of promotions and kind of go through a traditional um, process of being tested and certified, and I just leaped right through all that stuff. That's happened to me more than once. So I've kind of skipped the good old boy network and rising to the top of this network, but there was another person that had initially opened their organization up to me to become part of initially as a consultant. And his name was Dan, and he was a little bit older than me and also had an engineering background in oil and gas and was very competent at what he was doing. And but I think a lot of the new technology that was becoming used in the industry and the transaction services that he'd had a lot of a part of making successful and branding, into a trustworthy service provider. Those really were expanding, so fast that you needed someone like me to come in and bring the technology and the leadership and teaching, maybe some teaching and advisory skills. And underneath all that was a tremendous amount of caring that I had for the common person who was performing engineering and geology and some of the commercial analysis for supporting these huge multi-million dollar transactions. So there was an engineer that was working for me that her name was Yvonne, and so I'm sitting in my office, and I had felt for Yvonne because she was a Venezuelan engineer who had she was a single mother and had a family, in town that was supportive of her, and she had an education, um, a very competent engineer and very family orientated and also very vulnerable in many respects. And I'm sitting in my office and I have this in this dream, I have this psychic feeling or knowing that Yvonne has been let go. I mean, these weren't words that came to me. It wasn't like I didn't read an email, but this is my organization. And I had this sense of, oh my gosh, Yvonne's been fired. And I hurt. I felt this pain in my heart really bad. I knew that she was just in the process of leaving. I was aware of all these things. immediately I found myself getting up from my corner office and walking into to Dan, to his office, which was just around the corner from mine. And I was in shock. And well, let me just leave it at that. And I walk in the office and I see that there are two other of my people that are in Dan's office, and they're beginning to have a meeting. And Dan has been part of he's a founder of this organization. So he kind of has, he not kind of, but he has a deep relational connection to the company and to some of the other founders and the money that is behind it that is really supportive of the organization's plan. And if you've been in business, you understand what I'm saying. I mean, there's bills to pay, there's decisions to make, and although I have an immense amount of power in how the organization operates in the moment and into the near future, Dan is part of the infrastructure and has a relationship with the infrastructure that really does have the long-term interest of the organization and in mind. And I had respect for that, but I felt that Dan was the one that had let Yvonne go. And I immediately wanted to address this with him before, I knew that if I got around to Yvonne, that she would be looking for answers, and my authority had totally been undercut, and my dignity felt like it had been robbed from me. And I felt like this before, and this goes back to some early childhood trauma of the institutions and the protections that we really do expect of American society and family and church and community and neighborhood had all been defied. But I felt this wound so strongly. But rather than trying to ease my own pain immediately, I went looking for answers from Dan. And I found that there were two other people in that office. One of them was a highly respected engineer who had been my wingman, so to speak, um, Air Force guy, also maybe 7 or 8 years older than I am or was in the office and was getting ready to begin a meeting with him. And then there was another younger, kind of a technician or assistant that was in the office, standing by the window in Dan's office, behind Dan for some reason. And part of me felt like in most cases in my past, I would honor this situation that was evolving there, and it was a signal to me to come back. But in this particular moment, I felt something different that I hadn't really felt in real life or in any of my dream sequences. I felt like, no, I needed to insert myself. I needed to interrupt this and use my authentic power and authority and actually my sense of dignity and values in this moment. And that it was and this is kind of where the dream stopped, but I made the decision that I was going to say, okay, you guys need to step outside, and I need to talk to Dan about something that's very important. Now, so many times before this particular point, I would dismiss myself and wait for the timing to open up again to examine this with Dan. And as I realized this is a moment of of me claiming more of my own power and authenticity and dignity and making something with some degree of dignity, and I hesitate to use the word force, but it was something that I did feel like I was being led to exert in that situation, not with a threat or with any, um it was a very dignified use of my position, and it seemed warranted for the greater values that I felt were being jeopardized in the moment. And that's where the dream actually stopped. Now, as time went on, as I processed this and I wrote and I examined and reflected, I could see several different viewpoints emerging. Like one was, I was wounded, I was suffering, and I was, trying to get out of that pain. And then I realized, no, that wasn't the case. I was willing to feel uncomfortable. And I was really authentic and sincere in my examination of what was going on with Dan. Why would he fire? I'm really looking for an understanding of someone that I trusted and had a relationship with. Now, be it I understood Dan's position. Dan was conformed to this system. He really was part of the good old boy network and had relationships that were much deeper and stronger than mine with the powers that be. And for some reason, they had bypassed my authority openly. And I felt the a mix of this mysticism and this warrior. Part of me wanted to fight. Part of me wanted to be reasonable and then try to understand the deeper elements that were at play here. Part of me really felt this pain for Dan because he'd actually burned a hole in the conformed system that he had actually built. He had used his own loyalty and maybe even this good old boy network to skip over the framework that usually holds that corporate mold together, that you need to go through procedures and you'd actually, need to work with the person who Yvonne reported to rather than intervening and being a disruptor, which was not really his style. So in essence, was betraying the very rules that he had portrayed, had portrayed, to me. Why would he violate those for this? So it seemed to totally shatter the whole framework around that. Now, as I continued to examine that dream and my own past, and I mentioned earlier about the trauma that was associated in my life back when I was around 5 years old, was actually the wound that I was able to associate, not dissociate myself from, but actually hold that space in the moment and realize that in that dream, that in my own life and in the pain that I could actually feel in my body, and I can bring that back even right now to bear with you through the camera, the heartfelt connection to the dissonance that I know many people are encountering in their own life as their own illusions are being broken, and it's letting in what may feel like a scary sense of darkness, but it may actually be, once you take a breath, and allow yourself to fully feel your aloneness, to have that light really come into your heart and give you a greater sense of your power. And so this is the kind of dream work. This is the kind of work with your own psyche and your own process in your own life. And your story and your pathway is going to be entirely different than mine. And mine may sound kind of fancy and interesting, going from homeless to being, someone that's running a firm and has some sense of control, but is actually totally not in control of all the things that were so important to me. Because in that moment that I was walking into Dan, I could feel a connection to the disparity that I was dealing with fully in my own life, of having my kids feeling totally in jeopardy, of having my own financial um, security in jeopardy, and feeling called to just take this step forward to get more information in the moment, to make a better decision, to actually inform my heart and my essence and my calling, my spirit in my walk with God. So I hope you got something out of this sharing of Marx Headroom. And this is actually a very, hopefully, a soul level expression of what and how I operate in my life. And I just pray that it reaches others in a sense of affirming whatever you're going through in your life and meeting your needs to be real and to transform some of the chaos that many of us are encountering in our lives, to put it back into place for a better way forward. I am going to go break my fast shortly, and I'm wishing you all the best.